First, Barack, as a native Mississippian, I never thought I would live to see myself have to scramble with great classmates and friends in this tent to find food and potable water for my family in 2005. And I find it appalling that we are still not connecting the dots between having our young men and women in Iraq in search of weapons of mass destruction that do not exist when we did not have people here to help us, to help those of us who have the least. Are your colleagues beginning to connect the dots? Are we seeing some semblance of a wake-up call that we're in Iraq looking for something that doesn't exist when there are so many needs right here in Mississippi, Louisiana, and across this country?
I think that's a terrific place to. I think that's a terrific place to end, because I didn't touch much on foreign policy, given the magnitude of the domestic challenges that confront us. But one of the things that's happened, certainly in my lifetime, is the evaporation of the line between domestic and foreign policy. Not just as a consequence of terrorism. You know, as I was traveling in Russia, I met with the president of Ukraine, and he talked. Some of you remember the Orange Revolution and this great demonstrations that allowed Ukraine to break away from Russian dominance. Well, he was telling me that they still get 100% of their oil and gas from Russia, and so it turns out now that they've got parliamentary elections coming up, and Russia just may decide to triple oil and gas prices right before the election, which you can only imagine what kind of influence that will have, which then makes us think about the Gulf and our overdependence on foreign oil and when we're going to start getting serious about that. So let me just address directly the issue of Iraq, and then let me talk more broadly about foreign policy. We went in there supposedly for weapons of mass destruction. I think most of the people here know that I thought that was a dumb idea. I didn't see evidence of weapons of mass destruction. I didn't see a connection between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. Actually, now the reason we're there is because we really don't know what to do. Because, and let me explain part of what I'm struggling with. I mean, here I am, somebody who opposed the war, said so very clearly and unequivocally back in 2002. The analogy I use is, you know, if a driver drives a bus into the ditch, you should find out why the bus went into the ditch. You should probably fire the driver, which we didn't do in 2004. But you still got the bus in the ditch. You still got to figure out how to get it out. And what I'm struggling right now to figure out, and CIA briefings and meetings with Joint Chiefs don't tell me this, what's the tipping point at which the costs of us being there, the rise in the insurgency, the loss of American life, the fiscal burdens of $80 to $100 billion a year on top of the $450 billion defense budget that we're shelling out, at what point do those costs exceed the risks of us pulling out when there are no functioning or insufficient Iraqi security forces in place, and the possible eruption of a civil war that could lead to hundreds of thousands of deaths, and such a meltdown in the Middle East that we would then have to go back again? I mean, if you think $3 a gallon oil prices are bad, it'd be interesting to see what they would be with the civil war in Iraq. I don't know that answer yet, but I think that what's become clear is, if it was ever unclear, is that there is no military solution to this. This is going to be a political solution that requires the Shias and the Kurds to recognize that it is in their self-interest to be able to absorb and accommodate Sunni concerns. On the other hand, the Sunnis have to understand they are 20% of the population of Iraq. They're not going to rule again. And the surrounding Arab states have to be constructive partners in bringing some sort of accord in place that gives us then the time and the capacity to train Iraqi forces. Now, having said that, I'm not hugely optimistic. And I think we'll know by next spring whether or not that goal can be accomplished. If it cannot, then we're going to have some very hard decisions to make. More broadly in terms of foreign policy, and I'll just end on this note, I think, I've said this before, that the other party has a monopoly on the tough and dumb strategy, but we haven't crafted our tough and smart strategy. We haven't articulated what would it mean to have a foreign policy that is internationalist, that is muscular, that is serious about the need to maintain a series of relationships, commercial, political, cultural, with other nations, strengthen the United Nations, but is still protecting United States interests and, most critically, our security. We have the pieces of it. I think that we're starting to understand that our investment in Africa is not charity, it's self-interest. And that our trade policies and our aid policies have to reflect a full partnership as opposed to a client-patron relationship. I think we're starting to recognize as a consequence, at least the American people are starting to recognize, that unilateralism may sound good, but the results are not good. And so we've got to rethink our relationship to other countries. We can't just depend on Great Britain. David Lammy, I love Tony Blair. I met with him before he came, one of my favorite guys, but he can't be our only ally in the world. You know, that's a pretty big burden for Brother Blair to have to shoulder. I can only imagine the conversations he's having with the rest of the European Union every day. What's up with you and Bush? And he's got to explain, it's like having the sort of the uncle, crazy uncle that you don't really want to talk about. Keeps on coming out. So that's important work that we have to do, and the African American community, I think, can serve a vital role in that. One great example of where we have to play a role, and I think the people in this room have to play a role, is in thinking through the issue of immigration. There is an enormous opportunity, historical opportunity, for African Americans and Latinos to link together to create a more just and diverse society. But don't assume that either the ordinary Latino in Pilsen, Chicago, or the ordinary brother on the south side of Chicago is automatically going to embrace one another. There are real tensions involved there, primarily having to do with the issues of immigration and labor and how immigration affects wages. So there are a whole host of issues there, and it's very important for those of us who are in positions to bridge those two communities and help work through those difficult problems through to be engaged in that process. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.